Okay, I talked about Mars in relation to medical astrology and inflammation and its manifestation in, you know, all sorts of negative health effects. Anything negatively affected by inflammation, Mars has a helping hand in. You know, in the other video, I was speaking more. There's two types of people. um, there's people who, and everything in between, but there's, the original polarity in all energy is magnetic versus electric, positive, negative, male, female, however you want to describe it. I like to look at it as positive and negative because it seems to reflect nature more directly. But for the people who lean very magnetic, lots of earth and water, those are the magnetic elements, and air and fire are the electric elements. So the way I was describing Mars resulting in negative health manifestations in the original video was mostly sort of geared towards the suppressed Mars within the earth and water signs. Those are the ones that wind up turning into dis-ease, which turn into negative internal physical manifestations. Now, this video is about the flip side of that. Some people have a bit of an overactive Mars, and more often, where's the line between astrology and medical astrology? I don't know, but this winds up playing out in behavior. The suffocated Mars it turns into behavior too, of just sort of suffocating your spirit and just sort of squashing yourself into a smaller shell. An overactive Mars is just like, I don't care how the world takes me, I'm going to be who I am. And sometimes can be a bit inconsiderate about the world that it is affecting as it goes about affecting into the world. And I don't, you can have, this can be either something by birth, you have like just a very strong Mars, a bunch of planets in Aries, something along those lines that gives you this extra competitive, a lot of first house energy, something that gives you a lot of this sort of martial spirit. And Mars at its one of its weak points is just acting first and then dealing with the damage later. For people who and this can also happen by transit, by progression, where you can have a Mars progression in your chart where Mars comes into square Pluto, and suddenly you're alive with this Mars energy, and maybe you used to be able to be considerate of other people with the way you spoke. I was talking about how words are so much a part of you asserting yourself into the world. People with a sort of an afflicted but strong Mars tend to be very callous in the way they speak to other people. And sometimes you go through a season where you're just not as nice as you usually are. You're not as considerate about how you affect other people as you usually are. And some people just go through a Mars season. Some people are born with that in them, and they're slowly learning that lesson throughout their whole life. Some people were born learning other lessons, and then by progression or transit, we've all had Uranus going through Aries the last 7-8 years. We've all been dealing with some type of energetic impulse to our Aryan sort of life force. So depending on the degree and what angle it was making, and if you have any personal planets in Aries, and how it was affecting you personally is a different thing depending on your chart. But there was Uranus moving through Aries the last 8 years, activating that in each of us somehow, some way or another. And so I think the people who I spoke about in the first video, I'll be honest, tend to be the people who are more likely looking into astrology for insight. They're a bit more reflective, and it's magnetic. It's tuned in. It's tuning in. Tuning in. Electric is just is radiating out, and so those people aren't quite as reflective generally to comprehend the subtlety of astrology and be looking into it as deep to the point where they might be looking into this video. But for the rest of you, some of you are, and I go through my own seasons of, I personally had a lot of experience with it. I had in my progressed chart, I had Mars, it's not quite exact, but it was all within at least 4 or 5 degrees that I had Jupiter and Mars, which are still coming closer to conjunct in my progress chart, but the moon came through a few years back, and I seriously had anger issues. I'd never had them in my life at all, whatsoever. Not even a hint of an anger issue ever in my life. And then all of a sudden, I'm just filled with rage because it was just an aspect of humanity in general that I'd never wrestled with. I never had to. I'd never been in that season before, and then suddenly, like putting my fists through the wall and smashing stuff and being really destructive and loud and filled with rage, just uncontrollable. That was part of my depression with Lyme disease. There was anger issues, there was deep depression. I was a chaotic, turbulent sort of a hormonal mess at the time. And but that was my season, and it was really that was when I discovered progress charts, to be honest. I saw that, and I couldn't deny my role. Nothing had changed. I think I had every right to be angry at the things that I was angry at, but I needed to be dealing with those things all along. I'm the opposite Mars type, who tends to just sit in, not affect the world. I've always kind of struggled with that relationship. Do I assert myself, or do I just sort of hang back and be quiet? I've tended to hang back and be quiet in life, and it's been I've had a lot of negative. It turned into eventually negative health manifestations because of it. But it was funny that at the same time, I was going through this heavy Mars activation. It was really but I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to step into leadership. I didn't know. I was going through, if you get into looking into my Saturn and medical astrology video, there's 2 parts of, I hadn't stepped up into my Saturn. I was going through these Mars progressions, and I was just, so recognizing that your actions affect other people is really important too. And again, most of those people aren't watching this video. But it's too easy to get caught up into the, Mars is this competition, and we can too often define ourselves by how successful we are in competition, and let everything else, life is judging me by how successful I am. I need to be ultra competitive to be successful. My Mars is going to say what it doesn't matter how it affects other people. I need to succeed. And so if you take that attitude, by somebody's definition, you will succeed. But you'll cause a lot of negative health manifestations in the people around you in the process. And you won't heal yourself and step into your own higher, more spiritual sense of being a leader. And you'll continue to allow society to define how to use your Mars for you. And they'll always say be competitive. It's a dog-eat-dog world, so they'll tell you. So anyway, that's just a little bit further into Mars. I didn't want to leave it quite as one-sided as I had left it, because Mars can be an asshole. uncaring, mean, selfish asshole. So, if you recognize that in you, be honest with yourself about that. Think about how you affect other people, and I don't know, one step at a time, try to make yourself a better person. Peace, everybody.